Okay, all right, so we can get started. So it is 2:30. We have audience joining us. Welcome everyone to our local author, RJ Hoffmann, Jeff Hoffmann, and our audience members to our virtual local author fair. And this session is with our author, Jeff Hoffmann, who is written under the name RJ Hoffmann. And it's wonderful having you here, and it's wonderful to have our audience joining us. This is the first year that we've done our local author fair virtually, and last year we were not able to hold it at all, unfortunately, but in previous years we've done it in person, so we're glad that you're able to join us from the comfort of your homes, and you don't have to go out in the heat of today. Just a note that this program is being recorded so that others will be able to enjoy it in the future. It's being presented in webinar format, so any of you in the audience cannot be seen or heard. So no worries there, we cannot see or hear you. If you would like to share any comments as we go along, please feel free to enter any comments into the chat. So you might see that, that you can click on that either at the bottom of your screen or maybe up at the top, depending on what kind of device you're using. And if you have any questions at any time, feel free to type them where it says Q&A. You can just click on that, and then I will see your questions. And then after our author speaks, then we will have time for Q&A, and we will address your questions then. And also, actually, speaking of chat, if any of you have already read our author's book, Other People's Children, please type that into the chat so that we know whether you've read it yet or not. All right, so, and on to our author. So Jeff Hoffmann and his family have lived in Elmhurst since 2001. In 2017, at the age of 48, he quit his job and enrolled full-time at Columbia College in Chicago to pursue a master's in fine arts in fiction writing. In January 2020, shortly after graduating, he was signed by a literary agent. Soon after, his agent sold his debut novel, Other People's Children, to Simon & Schuster. It was published in April of 2021 under the name RJ Hoffmann. Welcome, Jeff Hoffmann.
Thank you very much, Ann. It's wonderful to be here. And, I guess I just start off by giving a little background on myself a little bit and the book. And then I'd love to just hear questions from folks in the audience, either writing questions or if you've read the book, questions about the book. We can make it a little book club if you'd like. So really, driven by you folks. Make sure that I don't talk too much unless I'm being directed by you to do so. So we, like Ann said, in 2017, I quit my job and went to go to school to learn how to write. And I'd written before, but just here and there. And it was a big step to go full time at my age, because it's, when you go to a party and people ask what you do for a living, you have to make something up or give a very long answer. So I treated it like a job, and fully aware that it was very unlikely that anything that resulted would be published, but knowing that it was something that I always wanted to do. I'd always been a reader, and as you approach 50, you realize it always won't, last forever. And so I took the plunge and gave myself a certain amount of time to be successful. And at the end of my MFA, I was lucky enough to find an agent, and a week after he signed me, he sold the book to Simon & Schuster, which was probably, the best part of the whole process, even more fun than the actual release of the book. But it's kind of cool to have a book too. I don't know if you can see that. You can't really because of my background, but being able to hold your own book in your hands and smell it and know that there's thousands of people out there reading it is a pretty exciting thing. So what kind of questions can I answer for you?
So that must have been completely thrilling.
It was.
So to be signed so quickly by one of the biggest publishers, so one of the big five, right?
Right.
So pretty amazing.
It was fun. The and the process is so slow in publishing. I started writing the book in 2017, and it took 2 years to write it, and then it took another, after it was done, 6-8 months to find an agent. And every short story that I got published was took 3 or 4 months to be accepted at least, and then another 4 or 5 months to be published. So writing is not spending a lot of time in your room by yourself and waiting for long periods of time. And that one, the most important one, was one that I didn't have to wait for. When I really expected it to be months and months and months after I signed with RV Klinger, and but it was literally 1 week later that we had our deal.
Amazing. So is there anything that would you like to read anything from the book, or
yeah, let me I probably should have bookmarked something. Let me, as we talk, I'll try to find a good spot to read. I see that there's a question there too. How I chose my agent. Actually, my agent chose me, I think, is a better way of saying it. I spent a lot of time, and actually I just gave a presentation on this about an hour ago, that I found some databases that had data about agents that were reading and requesting manuscripts, and then another database about agents that were selling books, and cross-reference those two lists to find active agents that actively reading and actively selling, and within the genre that the book fell. And so it was, I think 45 agents I queried, and of those 45, 7 requested the full manuscript, and 6 of those rejected it. And then Harvey asked for a bunch of changes, and I spent 2.5 months or so making the changes that he requested, and he liked it. And after like a day after I gave him the final version, he said, change your website. You've signed with me now. And then again, the week later, the lightning struck. So it was kind of exciting.
Wonderful. So, and then the second part of that question was, how important was the agent's track record? But it seemed like it just worked out that was the right agent for you. Is that right?
Yeah, I think the parts of the track record that were important to me were that they were selling books to publishers, right, and that they were reading, and also that it was within the genre that I spent time on, right. When I went to get my MFA program, they were very uninformative about how to actually get published. Very, very good at helping me write well, but it was difficult to get anybody to tell you how to find an agent. And the one piece of information they always gave was, look up the agents of the authors that you most admire. And I think that was the worst feedback, because all the agents of the authors I most admire, there's no way in hell they're going to sign me, right? And they're either dead, or they're not reading, or only taking recommendations from people they know. And so it quickly became clear to me that wasn't going to work, and I needed to find somebody that was out there and active. All right, so I'm going to read a quick chapter. So just to kind of summarize give the the context of the book. It's about adoption. It's Gail and John. By the way, my children are both adopted internationally, so this isn't our story. But Gail and John Durbin moved to Elmhurst after living downtown, and they had been through a number of miscarriages and some near misses on adoption, and they were chosen by Carly, a young woman in Morris, Illinois. Came from a background in which she struggled and not terribly well supported by her family. And she chose them. And Carly, then, after the Durbins had the baby home for 3 days, 4 days, Carly, pressured by her mother, decided to change her mind and not sign the final consent, which is necessary to seal up the adoption. And so and then the Durbins act in ways that cause mayhem to ensue. Makes sense. So I'm gonna read. I think this is the first. Carly shows up from a couple times actually once in the narrative before this, but it's from John's perspective as they meet Carly before she chooses them. And this is the first. The book shows, or it's written from multiple points of view, and one of them, of course, is Carly. Carly was late for class, but she walked slowly, waddled really, past the commons, past the two students sitting at the card table registering people to vote. She had slept poorly, contractions every few hours, like something was twisting her intestines. She should have just stayed home, but she missed class last Wednesday because her car wouldn't start, and she might miss more after the baby. She was barely hanging on to a B, and the class cost her almost $400. Besides, the doctor told her to ignore the contractions until they were 10 minutes apart, or until her water broke. Everybody stared when she entered the classroom, partly because she barged in late, partly because she was so fat that she could no longer zip her jacket, but mostly because they were bored to tears by whatever Professor Aronson was going on about. This was Carly's first class at Waubonsee Community College, and she had met nobody. Nothing like a 20-pound bubble of fat and fetus to get between you and your new friends. Aronson had given up trying to coax class participation after the first few weeks. Now he just droned on and on. She shuffled to the closest open seat and wedged herself in. Professor Aronson never stopped talking. Carly took out her notebook and squinted at the whiteboard. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. She hadn't done all of the reading. She had 4 shifts behind the cash register at Giovanni's that week, and she had scanned the chapter on Maslow. She worked to remember it her own way while Professor Aronson babbled. First 3 levels were easy: physiological needs. Carly was always hungry. She ate a whole pizza at work the night before during her break. Food came first. Safety needs. In the beginning, when Andy started delivering pizza at Giovanni's, she had felt safe with him. The first time they hooked up, she didn't yet know about his addictions. He made her laugh, and the way he smiled revealed a kindness that she wasn't used to. When he was tweaking crack, though, he became unpredictable and manic, and some of his friends really scared the crap out of her. When Carly finally broke it off with Andy the night after he punched her, and just a couple of weeks before she realized she was pregnant, her 3 love and belonging needs took a hit. Not that he ever really loved her, but when he wasn't high, the gentle way he treated her made her feel warm and alive. Her friends drifted off about the time the baby bump arrived. Her mom hated her, and her sister didn't seem to care one way or the other. The love and belonging were going to need some work. Number 4, esteem needs. Probably why she wanted to become a nurse, why she sat in this classroom for 3 hours every week, listening to Aronson talk about all this crap that she'd never need to know. She had read the paragraph about self-actualization 4 times, but still had no idea what to make of that tiny triangle at the top. It's probably more guilt than her esteem needs that kept her coming back to class. She promised herself that she'd get her life together. She promised the baby. Once she decided to give up the baby, she couldn't just go stock shelves at Walmart or pack boxes at the warehouse or find another meth head like Andy to nuzzle. She'd be letting the baby down, but double. She wondered why Maslow didn't devote a slice of his pyramid to guilt. That's just the first part of the chapter from Gail's perspective. I'm sorry, Carly's perspective in the beginning.
Thank you. That's wonderful to hear her perspective after reading about, the parents, and then it's wonderful to hear the about this character who we then sympathize with.
Yeah.
So, and your story is set in Elmhurst. So
It is.
how did you come about doing that? I remember starting to read it and then reading Myrtle Avenue and all other places that I know very well. So
Right.
how did that come about?
That was pure laziness. I could go research a bunch of other places, and there's a bunch of other places in the book that I did need to research. But and at the beginning, when I started writing it, I said, well, who knows? Maybe it'll be Elmhurst, or maybe it'll be a made up town that's Elmhurst-like, right? But and there are some parallels from our experience, right? We did move from downtown Chicago. We did expect to have children, but didn't have children yet when we moved here. We felt the kind of the disconnection from the community. There's a line from John, the father, that said, that they didn't really exist until they had children. And that's how I felt. We were 2.5 years in Elmhurst and hadn't really met anybody in the town yet. And then when we had kids, they'd be like, "Oh, who are you?" Let's have a block party. So there's a little bit of the reality of that. And Elmhurst is a very, and from my perspective, a very typical suburb, right? But it's also particular, and I think that's the thing that they taught at Columbia, is to make your settings and your characters and the town as a character to a certain degree, make them as particular as possible. And the easiest way to do that was to write about the town I've lived in for 20 years.
Yeah, well, it really brought it to life.
Good.
And without giving too much away, there's a passage in a chapter in the middle of the book one of the chapters that focuses on Gail, the wife, character. And at the end of the chapter, it starts out, her mind, though, that wolf wouldn't sit still. That I found that to be quite a metaphor.
Thank you.
How did you come up with that, or what was your inspiration?
So things like that just kind of fall out on the page, I think, right? I tend to write longhand, and so I write really fast, and just when I write in front of the computer, I'm editing as I write, and when I'm scribbling on a notebook, nothing really matters, because it's only scribblings on a notebook. So things like that just kind of tend to fall out. And I found that metaphors were very useful. I see one of the questions that was asked was what was most challenging about writing the story. And I think one of the things that it's about childbirth, it's about motherhood, it's about miscarriage, and it's about fatherhood too. And my thesis would be that fatherhood is an awful lot like motherhood. That us men experience the same emotions that others experience. We just don't talk about it. But a challenging thing was to be respectful about some of those experiences that a man as some people believe a man doesn't have a right to write about, and certainly need to be written about with respect. And so when I was talking about miscarriage, and I was talking about people have asked if I did research on miscarriage and childbirth and things like that, and I purposely didn't, and not out of laziness, but one of my favorite authors, Ian McEwan, I saw an interview where he talked about writing about things that he had no experience with, and sometimes he chose, and this was the case for me, he chose to not research it, but to imagine what it felt like, and then that keeps him from describing it. And he was talking about dismembering a body, which is a very, very different thing, right? But I knew that I didn't want to describe childbirth, because I was bound to be disrespectful, and the prose was bound to come off wrong. So I not only didn't do research and tried to imagine what it felt like. But then when I wrote about it, I didn't describe it. I didn't talk about details. I wrote metaphors. You know, when Carly was experiencing childbirth, it was, you know, waves of I think broken glass in her gut, right? And the miscarriages that Gail goes through are referenced by the size of the fruit that the fetus was when those you know, the grain of rice or I forget the other ones right now, to be honest with the grape, I think. But the rather than, you know, describe them viscerally, it was important for me to describe them through metaphor, or, you know, write about them through metaphor rather than describe them through words.
What are you working on next? Are you working on something else now?
You know, I just finished a second novel. My agent's working the pedal right now. It's about four men who grew up together, and they got in a fight when they were 18 because they were graduating high school in a parking lot with two other boys, and they killed one of them and maimed the other, and then the friendship fell apart around that. They got away with it. Their friendship fell apart, and they came back when one of the boys dies, or when one of the men dies at the age of 50, and then the truth, of course, begins to emerge, and some mayhem around that emerges, but they also have all had their lives warped by the lies that they've been telling. And now I'm writing about a gold store employee. He buys gold in like 2011, 2012, and he also is divorced and has decided to, without telling his ex-wife or her new husband, that he's going to move in next door to them. And then, of course, you know, mayhem erupts.
Wow. Okay. So that's two different works that you're.
Yeah. The first
right?
one was the one that I've recently finished, and the second one maybe, you know, 100 pages into a rough draft. So.
All right. Excellent. So we have those to look forward to as well.
I hope.
And in the meantime, we've got your book, Other People's Children.
There it is.
That.
Yeah.
And which is definitely a page turner. With introducing 3 different mothers and the choices they have to make, the father, and there are lots of twists and turns that are unexpected along the way. So if anybody has not read it, we do own it in the library, and you can put it on hold or contact us and we will help you track down a copy. Thank you, Jeff Hoffmann, so much for joining us.
I appreciate your time, and thanks for everybody who showed up.
Absolutely. It's been delightful to have you here.
Thank you.
Look forward to see what you're working on next.
Thanks, Ann.
Thanks so much. Take care.
You too.
Thanks.